All right, let's dive into the world of innovation. Specifically, Peter Drucker's Innovation and Entrepreneurship.
Ah, classic.
Absolutely. And we've got an expert here to help us unpack some of the key insights.
Glad to be here.
So, we're not just talking about theory here. We're going straight to the source, pulling directly from audio excerpts of Drucker's book.
The real deal, yeah.
Exactly. So if you're ready to actually make innovation happen, well, you came to the right place.
Couldn't agree more. Drucker really gets down to brass tacks. No fluff.
Right.
Like right off the bat, he tackles this myth that big companies can't innovate.
Yeah, you hear that one all the time, right?
All the time. But then Drucker throws out all these examples.
Like who?
Well, you got Johnson & Johnson, 3M, even Citibank. Proof that size doesn't have to be a roadblock.
Interesting. So if those companies, with all their layers and procedures, can pull it off, what's the real problem? For the rest of us, I mean.
The problem, Drucker says, is that for established companies, what they're already doing is working. It's tough to change gears when you're already speeding down the highway, you know?
Makes sense. So, like, how do you change a tire on a moving car?
That's a great analogy. And that's where Drucker's 7 sources of innovation come in.
7 sources. Okay. Is this like a recipe for innovation?
It's more like a framework, a systematic way to approach innovation, not just waiting for some eureka moment.
So less about random inspiration, more about a deliberate process.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm hooked. Give me the quick rundown. What are these 7 sources?
All right, so Drucker identifies the unexpected, incongruities, process need, industry and market structures, demographics, changes in perception, and new knowledge.
Wow, okay, that's quite a list.
And he doesn't just list them out, he illustrates them with real-world examples, which is what makes it so practical and useful.
Well, that's the Drucker magic, right? Always bringing it back to the real world.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's pick one just to get a taste. Where should we start?
Let's talk about the unexpected. We tend to focus on successes, but Drucker makes this interesting point about failures.
Failures. Really?
Yeah, like unexpected failures can actually be super valuable.
Okay, now you got to give me an example.
All right, think about the Ford Edsel.
Oh, yeah, the Edsel. Wasn't that a total flop?
Huge flop. But it accidentally revealed something really important.
What's that?
A change in how people were thinking about cars. They weren't just buying based on income anymore. It was about lifestyle.
Huh. So the Edsel's failure kind of paved the way for the Thunderbird's success.
Exactly. Because Ford learned from that unexpected outcome.
Interesting. So it's about paying attention to those surprises, even the negative ones, because they might point to a bigger shift, some hidden opportunity.
You got it. And, that leads us nicely into another source, demographics.
Demographics, okay. Like population changes and stuff?
Yeah, and those shifts can be predictable, but Drucker says people ignore them all the time.
Really? Seems like a missed opportunity.
Big time. He calls them gold mines that most people just walk right past.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this connects to my own work. We're always trying to stay ahead of the curve, predict the next big thing. What kind of demographic shifts did Drucker point to?
Well, he mentions Melville Shoe, this company that saw the teenage boom coming.
The baby boomers, you mean?
Exactly. They anticipated that whole wave and totally tailored their strategy around it.
Smart move. Rode that wave right to the top, I bet.
And then there's Sears Roebuck. They went into Latin America way back in the 50s.
Sears in Latin America?
Yep. They saw the urbanization trend happening there, way before most people.
Wow. So Sears, this all-American brand, tapped into a whole new market by recognizing those demographic shifts.
Yep, it's all about seeing the bigger picture, even those slow-moving trends that can have a huge impact.
I like it. So we got unexpected events, demographics. What else?
Well, sometimes those big trends are driven by something even more subtle. Changes in perception.
Changes in perception. You mean like how people see the world even if the facts haven't changed?
Exactly. Drucker says these shifts can create massive opportunities for innovation. Like in the 50s, more Americans started thinking of themselves as middle class.
Even if they weren't?
Even if their income didn't necessarily reflect it. It was a mindset shift.
Interesting. And someone saw that shift and capitalized on it.
You bet. William Benton, the guy behind Encyclopedia Britannica.
Okay, Britannica, what did he do?
He started selling encyclopedias not just as information, but as a symbol of middle-class success, like a way for parents to invest in their kids' future.
Wow, so he wasn't just selling books, he was selling a feeling, an aspiration.
Exactly. And it highlights how understanding those perception shifts can open up whole new approaches.
It's not just about numbers, it's about tapping into those emotional currents that drive people.
Precisely.
This is making me think about all sorts of possibilities. But how do you actually spot these shifts before they become obvious?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, and that's where we'll pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
Perception shifts, huh? I'm really curious to unpack that more and see how we can actually apply that to our own work. But first, I gotta circle back to those 7 sources of innovation we've only touched on two.
Right. And they're all connected, like those demographic shifts. They can actually trigger changes in perception, which then lead to those unexpected opportunities we were talking about.
Ah, so it's like a chain reaction. One thing leads to another.
Exactly. It's a whole ecosystem of innovation.
Okay, so where to next on our innovation journey? What other source should we explore?
Let's stick with the perception theme, but take it a step further. How about new knowledge?
New knowledge, okay. That sounds pretty broad. What exactly does Drucker mean by that?
He's talking about innovations that come from scientific breakthroughs, new tech, or even just new ways of understanding the information we already have.
So like the internet, smartphones.
Exactly. Stuff that creates whole new industries.
Okay, game changers for sure. But I'm guessing it takes a lot more than just a brilliant idea to make those happen.
Oh yeah, way more. Drucker uses the Wright brothers as an example. They weren't just dreamers, they were meticulous researchers.
So it's about understanding the science, the tech behind it all.
Totally. They figured out what was missing, what knowledge gaps were holding back powered flight, and then they went and filled those gaps.
So it's like solving a puzzle, finding those missing pieces.
Yes. And it's not just about the tech itself, it's also about strategy. Knowing how to apply that new knowledge to actually create something valuable.
Got it. So how do you do that? Any good examples?
Drucker talks about DuPont and nylon. They didn't just invent a new material, they created the market for it.
Nylon, that's a good one. What did they do?
Well, they thought about how nylon could be used in all sorts of things, like women's stockings, car tires, everything.
So they basically built the demand while they were creating the supply.
Exactly. That's strategic thinking.
Pretty impressive.
Okay.
But it also sounds kind of risky, right?
Oh, it can be. Drucker's honest about that. Knowledge-backed innovation is high stakes, high reward. You need a lot of investment, a long development time, and you got to be comfortable with uncertainty.
So not for the faint of heart. Any examples of how that's played out?
He talks about the computer industry. It took decades for it to actually become profitable.
Really? Even with companies like IBM?
Even IBM. Lots of companies didn't survive that journey.
So it's not enough to have the coolest tech. You got to be able to adapt, keep up with the changes.
100%. And that's where entrepreneurial management comes in. Drucker says a lot of tech innovators lack that.
What do you mean? Like they're great with tech, but not so much with business?
Exactly. They might be brilliant scientists or engineers, but they don't know how to bring their inventions to market.
All right, let's break that down. What does entrepreneurial management actually mean?
It means being able to assess risks, make strategic decisions, and knowing when to change course.
So it's about being a leader, a manager, not just a visionary.
Exactly. It's about having that business sense to turn the vision into reality.
This reminds me of something you mentioned earlier, the receptivity gamble. What was that all about?
Ah, good memory. Yeah, with knowledge-based innovation, you're often creating something brand new, something the market's never seen before.
Right. And there's no guarantee people are going to love it.
Exactly. You're taking a gamble on whether people will embrace it or not.
Like throwing a party and hoping people show up.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And it's really hard to predict. Drucker talks about how people were skeptical of railroads when they first came out, even computers.
I guess everything new seems a little weird at first.
Right. And then sometimes things take off that you wouldn't expect. Like 15 years before the telephone took off, there was a very similar invention that nobody cared about.
So even with hindsight, it's tough to know for sure what will resonate.
Totally.
So if you're an innovator, how do you deal with that uncertainty? Is it all just luck?
Well, luck definitely plays a role. But Drucker gives us some practical advice, some don'ts, to help avoid common pitfalls.
Okay, I'm all ears. Lay some Drucker wisdom on me.
First one, don't be clever.
Don't be clever. Now that's an interesting one. What does that even mean?
It means your innovations have to be understandable, user-friendly for regular people, not just super complicated and brilliant.
So keep it simple.
Exactly. Think about products that everyone uses. They're usually the ones that are intuitive, easy to pick up.
Right. No one wants to read a manual just to figure out how to use a can opener.
Exactly. Next one, don't diversify.
Meaning?
Focus your resources, especially when you're starting out. Trying to do too many things at once just spreads you too thin.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
That's it. And this next one might seem counterintuitive, but it's important. Don't innovate for the future.
Wait, what? Isn't that the whole point of innovation, to create the future?
Sure, in a way, but Drucker's point is that if your innovation doesn't solve a problem that exists now, it's probably going to stay just an idea.
Ah, so it has to have a practical application today, even if it has bigger potential down the road.
Exactly. Like, think about Edison and the light bulb. He wasn't just creating some futuristic concept. He was solving a very real problem. People needed better light.
It's about finding that sweet spot between present needs and future possibilities.
You got it.
Okay, this has been a lot to digest. Innovation seems like a pretty demanding process.
It is. Drucker's not sugarcoating it. It takes real work, knowledge, and ingenuity.
No shortcuts, huh?
Not really, but here's the thing. You don't have to be a genius to innovate.
So what's the secret then?
Successful innovators are really good at analyzing opportunities and figuring out which ones fit their strengths, what they're already good at, what resources they have.
So play to your strengths. Leverage what you already have.
Exactly. Don't try to be everything to everyone. Focus on what you do well.
Makes sense. It's like finding your niche.
And one last thing. Drucker reminds us that innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's part of a bigger system, the economy, society.
So it's about understanding the context, the market, the people you're serving.
Exactly. You got to be market-focused, understand what people actually want and need.
All right, we're back, diving deeper into Peter Drucker's Innovation and Entrepreneurship. We've been exploring a lot of fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
You know, those unexpected failures, the impact of demographics, those perception shifts.
Yeah, it's amazing how those all tie together, like pieces of a puzzle.
Exactly. And, you know, in part 2, we were talking about how new knowledge can lead to these huge innovations, but it also sounds pretty risky.
It can be.
And we were talking about this idea of entrepreneurial management. I gotta admit, that's been stuck in my head ever since.
It's a key concept, especially for knowledge-based innovation.
Okay, so can we unpack that a little more? What does Drucker actually mean by entrepreneurial management?
It's about having that vision, for the future, but also being able to make it happen, to actually bring that innovation to life.
So you need more than just a great idea.
Exactly. Think about it. You have this groundbreaking technology, this new knowledge.
Yeah, but what then?
Well, you got to figure out how to turn that into a product, a service, something people will actually use.
Right, and convince investors to get on board.
Yeah, and build a team. It's a whole process.
Okay, so it's a mix of things, right? Leadership, strategy, good business sense.
You got it. You have to be able to assess risks, make tough calls, be ready to change direction if things aren't working.
So being flexible is important.
Super important. The path to innovation, it's rarely a straight line.
More like a winding road.
Exactly.
Okay, so for someone just starting out on their innovation journey, what's the first step? Where do they begin?
Well, Drucker says successful innovators really focus on their strengths. What are they good at? What resources do they have?
So leverage what you already have.
Yes. And then find opportunities that align with those strengths. You don't have to be everything to everyone.
It's about finding your niche, what makes you unique.
Exactly. And remember Drucker's advice. Don't innovate for the future. Innovate for the present.
I'm still wrapping my head around that one.
Yeah, it seems counterintuitive, right? But think about it. If your innovation doesn't solve a problem people have right now, it's probably just going to stay an idea.
It needs a practical application, something relevant to today.
Exactly. Like, think about Edison and the light bulb again. He solved a real problem. People needed better light.
Form and function, right?
Yes. It has to be useful.
All right, and just to remind us, what were those don'ts that Drucker talked about?
Don't be too clever, don't diversify, and don't innovate just for the future.
Solid advice. Easy to forget when you're caught up in the excitement of a new idea.
Definitely. But those are some of the biggest pitfalls for innovators.
That's why it's so valuable to have a framework, like the one Drucker lays out. It helps you stay focused.
Absolutely. Helps you avoid those common mistakes.
Okay, so big picture here. How does all this apply to, the everyday listener? What can they take away from all this?
Well, one thing I find really empowering about Drucker's work is that he makes innovation seem achievable.
Not just for geniuses or big companies.
Right. It's a learnable skill.
So anyone can be an innovator.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's about understanding the principles,
Yeah.
being willing to experiment, and applying those principles in a way that works for you.
It's about the process, not some magic formula.
Exactly. And it's not a solo mission. Innovation happens in a context.
The market, the community, your customers.
Yep, you got to understand those connections.
Wow, this has been a really insightful deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about what it takes to make innovation happen.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you, and honestly, this is just scratching the surface of what's in Drucker's book.
I'm definitely adding that to my reading list.
Yeah.
But hey, before we wrap up, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Just remember, innovation, it's not a destination, it's a journey. It's about constantly exploring, experimenting, and being open to new possibilities.
Love that. Innovation as a journey, not a destination. Great way to put it. So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep experimenting, keep innovating, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.